We're here today with Bob from Groove Synthesis, and he's going to tell us all about the third wave, their new wavetable synthesizer. Bob, could you give us a bit of background to the synth?
Sure. So the synth was our imagination of what would have happened if PPG would have stayed in business. I loved the PPG when I was a kid. Of course, I couldn't afford it like nobody else could, but I bought one in the early 90s when it became a little bit affordable, and always had wondered what would have happened if they would have continued on in the hardware. So what you've got here is a wavetable synthesizer that will do the original PPG. It will do the 8-bit wavetables and all of the processing, or lack thereof, depending on where you are in the processing chain, that was done with the original PPG, which we've got behind us here, including the analog filters and everything else. But then it's also will do a modern day wavetable that is sampled at 96 kilohertz and is properly spread across the keyboard, no aliasing, all that good stuff. It also has, as a third mode for each of these oscillators, an analog model that is doing spline interpolation, also completely anti-aliased all the way up. In fact, we had a gentleman in here recently doing a CS80 patch with it. So you're covered with analog, you're covered with modern day wavetables, and you're covered with the vintage PPG if you want to, pretty much exactly duplicate those patches. So it does all three. It also has the ability to make a wavetable rather than you having to spend an hour or so on your own trying to figure out how you're going to cut up this audio and make a wavetable. A wavetable, of course, is 64 single cycle waves. The 64 is arbitrary, but we stuck with that. So 64 single cycle waves that you will then stitch together. And if you can imagine, if you took a piece of audio and had to do that by hand, that's a tedious process. The idea here is that you'll be able to plug audio into the back or bring in a wave file, and it will do the work for you and make a wave file. And we'll show you that at the end. It is 3 oscillators, so that's why it's called the third wave, because the naming convention back when it was PPG was he had a 2.2 or a 2.3. The first 2 referred to the number of oscillators. So this is 3 oscillators, and then it steps well beyond that in that it's got a 6-stage linear wave envelope. It's got 4 ADSRs. 2 are freely assignable wherever you want. It's got 4 LFOs. And it's got 16 mod spots with, I believe, I'm going to get this wrong, but I think we've got roughly 30 and some change sources and 30 and some change destinations. Just enough to tie yourself in a knot with all the modulation possibilities. And then you've got a sequencer on board as well that does pattern-based sequencing. So this is not your normal step sequencer. This is more like what you would see on an MPC or a drum machine, where you can actually do patterns with quantization and song mode. It's of course got an arpeggiator, and then it is 4-part multitimbral. So it's 4-part multitimbral with 24 total voices. So if you're running a stack, you've still got a 6-voice synthesizer, even if you're running 4 patches all on top of each other. It'll do a binaural stereo spread. It'll do the old-fashioned PPG where the voices pan back and forth, and it also has 2 effects per patch. So if you're running a multitimbral patch, you've still got 2 effects for each one of those patches in that 4-part patch. The first thing we always get asked is, so how does it sound compared to a PPG? Now the PPG that we have here is somewhat of a moving target, as you guys, when you walked in, heard the cutoff frequency changes. But this is a factory patch from Virtual Music, actually, the people that still fix it over in Austria. And if I play a couple of notes here on this, you will get... So it definitely will cover your ground for the PPG. But then, so I'm going to pass you the microphone real quick. And actually, I'll take it back. I'm going to come over here. So we are on this patch, and this has, of course, got all of the grunge all the way up to the top. I'm going to switch it to another factory patch where you can really hear the aliasing. So if you really want that PPG aliasing, yep, if you really want that PPG aliasing, I'm going to play a real high note up here, and you should hear it's kind of whistling at you and buzzing, yeah. Now if we go out to, so each of these oscillators is independent of each other. I'm going to switch, you see we're on P wavetables. I'm going to switch to the user wavetables, which are those 96K wavetables that I was just referring to, and we'll play the same exact patch. And let's see, where am I? There we go. So I've got a different wavetable on each of those, but I'm going to play the same note, and now you're alias free. So it's up to you how you want to run the thing. If you want that grunge, you've got it. If you don't, you've got it. I'm going to show you one other patch here, again, without the effects. Well, actually, I shouldn't say that. So you tell me, I'll play this patch. You tell me if you're hearing effects or not. So let's see. My answer to that is you're not hearing effects. As you can see here, what that is doing is it's a stereo patch that's just walking through the wavetable. So you get a lot of movement, as you just heard, just by walking through a wavetable. This is a patch by one of our sound designers, Drew Newman, and he also did, I'm going to show you this one because it's really cool. Here's an example of a 4-part patch. So you've still got 6 voices going. And this is, he did the scoring for a show called Aeon Flux. So he calls this Aeon Flux. So if I go up. There's an example of a 4-part patch. But again, no effects. You're just hearing a whole lot of movement on the patch itself.
What effects do you have on there?
We do have, okay, so let me find a patch with effects, but I can show you. Now this is not a good one to show because we're editing one of the 4. So let me get you into a patch here where, in fact, let's go back to that analog patch. That's the easiest one to hear. So I will go back to the one with the 4 sawtooth waves, and we're going to edit both at the same time. Okay, there we go. Okay, so on this, we've got, it starts off here with room simulation, so that's a room reverb, but going all the way back to the beginning, we've got bucket brigade delay, stereo delay, and then we go into an Echoplex simulation. That one I'm pretty proud of, because if you go to the miscellaneous area, you're going to get all the way down to stuff like the head alignment. People used to bend the head on the, and all kinds of record level, all of that. That's all in that model. And then we've got chorus. Of course, you're just bread and butter chorus.
These are all digital effects.
These are all digital effects, yeah. And it would have to be, given some of these models that are in here: phaser, flanger, distortion pedal, Leslie speaker, ring modulation, room simulation. So the room simulation and the concert hall are both a model of a 480L, a lexicon. And then the final one here, which is super plate, I'll turn the reverb way up as far as this. This is a 224 XL, a lexicon model. That just goes and goes and goes and goes. And I'll turn the reverb back down because it'll go forever. So yeah, that's what you've got as far as that. And with that, I think I'm going to pass it over to Mattia to do some more patch demos. But you get kind of an idea here.
Thanks, Bob.
So hi, my name is Matija Simovic. I'm from the band Inhalt, and I run a recording studio here in Los Angeles called Infinite Power Studios. That's where we've been doing some of the sound design and some of the testing on this wonderful keyboard. And some of my favorite stuff and some of my favorite sounds here actually have more to do with the sequencer in tandem with the multi-part functionality, because the sequencer allows us to fire off multiple timbres. So if I pull up just a patch like this, and I'm just going to give myself a little bit more volume. So this is a really good example of just the power of this synth. We have, the chords are actually 2 patches, and we're doing it that way so that we have a stereo spread. So we have a true stereo sound, and then the other sounds are other timbres that are going on in the multi-part. Another example of that. And so this is also great if we go into the multi-part area. We have discrete control over the volume, over the tuning, over the pan of every part. So it brings up a kind of performative angle in that we can bring things in real time. And because we have 4 outputs, all of that can be discretely assigned out, but you can still play with it, you know, in real time, bringing it in and out. Now just pulling up a sound to just show that it's how simple this sequencer really is. Even though it does so much, there's a lot of, and you can do a lot with it. It's very, very straightforward to get notes programmed into it. Have the option of also recording in parameters, so I'll do a bit of that now just to show.
And what exactly is the wave surfer knob doing there?
Wave Surfer is a really, really good function here in that we can manually, with one knob, scan through the wave offsets, meaning the wavetable position of all 3 oscillators at once. So on other synthesizers, normally you have to like assign a macro or go through, do each one individually. Here, we're actually able to do that and program it into the sequencer, which is really cool, which is what you're hearing here. It's that motion for all 3 is now on playback. And then, of course, you know, in terms of the sound library here, I mean, we have just beautiful kind of very, very wide sort of sounds, but that evoke a feeling of the past, but aren't necessarily retro either. There's something kind of present and past about it, especially in terms of how melodic the top end has this kind of very nice musicality. And what we found, because I've been using this also on the production of music with certain artists, is that they really like the top end because it allows them to get away from something like typical synth lead sort of sounds, like ARP leads and things like that. While we can do those things with the analog kind of modeling waveforms, there's something to this really nice wavetable sound that people have been responding to.
Could you demonstrate a patch that maybe the PPG wouldn't be capable of, but the third wave is?
Oh. Well, like this. Something like a hybrid, as the patch says, a hybrid Hoover sound, you know, there's no way you'd be able to do that. And we're able to do that here because we have SAW waveforms. We have those kind of virtual analog waves feeding an analog filter. Another one, sort of, let's see. Very cheeky kind of main room sound. Not possible to be done on a PPG wave. Similarly, though, the other side of it, if I switch banks here, you know, some of these kinds of sounds, because they're using the more hi-fi wavetables that operate at 96K, they also lead to a different kind of wavetable sound that the PPG also can't do because of just what its limits are.
It's a really gritty one.
Yeah, yeah. There's a lot of color that's available here.
Is there a distortion in the effects?
There is a I don't believe that patch uses it, but there's actually two stages of saturation. There is a saturator here in the filter area, and there's also more ways you can beat up sound in the effects section. The other thing that I also wanted to mention is, and I really just want you to see this here, we've put a lot of kind of thought into elegantly being able to create voice-to-voice offsets. So we can start with the actual circuit drift, which allows us to make it kind of as bent or as on as we want to. When you're trying to kind of get some of the sounds of this, as we were talking about earlier, just yesterday, we were having the actual PPG just change, you know, subtly as the day went on just by virtue of being on. So if you want to model some of that kind of stuff, you can program this into your patch with the circuit drift parameter. There's also different envelope types, meaning like this patch, for example, uses exponential envelopes, which are very much what you would expect from like a very modern polyphonic analog synth. But you can change that to the PPG shape. And because the PPG had really these sort of very, very specific envelope shapes, kind of very long release times, you can choose. So if you're trying to nail something bang on with that, you can set it, save it, and it's per patch. So you can just sort of go around. This patch is more of a PPG shape, another patch is more of an exponential shape, so on and so forth. And I will, you know, let's see.
As far as addressing the distortion issue, I'll walk in real quick with Mattia. It's the way it's set up, as Mattia was saying, there's saturation here into the analog filter, but you've also got the ability with the levels. Even if you don't have that saturation up, you can turn those levels up on those three oscillators enough that you're going to already hear harmonic distortion going out before you ever get there. So it's up to you how you do it. And then, of course, we do, as Mattia was mentioning, but it wasn't on the patch that you were hearing with him, you do have several models of distortion over here, including a tube model.
And ring modulation.
And ring modulation, all that stuff. But what you were hearing there was just the analog filter distorting because we were overdriving it too much with the level of the oscillators. So,
and on that sort of note, because there's a lot of headroom that we can play with, just in the oscillator section alone, it's also very dependent on the kind of waveform that you're putting through too. So if you're putting something that's very kind of fundamental, it's going to have a different response to the filter. If you're putting something that's very, very complex with a lot of overtones to it, it's going to completely change the feel of where this level knob is set. So, and it's all programmable, so you can save all that per patch.
Bob, could you run us through how you would make your own wavetable on the third wave?
Sure. So we've got a feature that is a wavetable maker, and what you've got here is the option to either plug in an audio jack into the back and it will go into the input and it will record right into the unit at 96K, or you can take a wave file, excuse me, that you have made on the computer, also at 96K, drop it in. Eventually we're going to have support for stuff like Serum and what have you, but right now this is really cool. You can make your own wavetables without having to go through that big process of doing it yourself for over an hour. So I'm going to have you hold the microphone and I'm going to show you, here we've got a wave file.
Groove synthesis.
And hopefully you can hear that's me just saying groove synthesis there.
Groove synthesis.
There, now you can hear it. Okay, and we're going to take that wave file and we're going to drop it into the third wave. So right here, what you see me doing is I'm hooked up via USB, so we've got USB functionality on here, and I just dropped it into the audio folder on the third wave. So now over here on the third wave, what we're going to do is in the global menu, if you do it this way instead of recording it in, you've got Read Wavemaker wave file. I'm going to hit go, and you'll see there's the beginning of that name, Groove, and I'm going to hit OK. Here we are in the Make Waves display. I'm going to hit Make Table. So if I hit Make Table here, it's detecting the pitch, and now it's searching for waveforms. So again, what this is doing is if you had to do this yourself, you'd be sitting there cutting for up to an hour. What this is doing is it's taking a machine learning loss function and it's analyzing that wave that you've put in there and figuring out where are the optimal splice points to keep the thing as similar as possible to what we started with. And this is the last feature that we're still working on before we get it out the door, so it's not 100% yet, but here we go. It's now done, and if I go over to this preset that we're on, what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the wavetable that we're using to be this wavetable that we just made. And now if we hit it, we should hear some semblance of groove synthesis.
Groove synthesis.
There we go. It's not 100% yet, as you heard, but we will have that by the time it goes out the door in August. And it will go, I'm going to hit this wave envelope so you can see the wave envelope here. What we're doing is we're going from the beginning, groove, all the way up to the synthesis at the end. And I'm going to hold the note this time. It's going to go backwards, back down. So
Groove synthesis.
Holds, and it comes back at you. Yeah. So, and it comes back at you.
You slow the speed that it's scanning.
Yep, and you can slow that. So again, we're on a wave envelope. This is a good demonstration of the wave envelope. So if I take the time for position 2 and I slow it down, now it's, yeah, it's like the Fat Boy Slim effect. Yeah, where we can speed it way up.
Groove synthesis. Groove synthesis. Groove synthesis.
There you go. Yeah.
Really cool.
Yeah. And that's an example of a patch that's not really normal audio, right? It's me saying something into the machine. So it will handle pitched material, but it will handle also non-pitched material, and that's the point. So that hopefully gives you a demonstration of what it's capable of as far as making this your own synthesizer, because you can have your own unique set of wavetables in here in addition to whatever we give you.